Welcome to the most northerly doctor in Britain podcast, produced by Michelle Langthorne. That's me. We will dive into insightful diary extracts recorded by Dr. Anne Marshall as she documents her extraordinary time as a sole GP, providing routine and emergency care to the 632 inhabitants of Unst, located in Shetland. We listen together and then the reflection and conversation starts. Episode 6. The first winter storm and saying goodbye.
Last full day at the surgery tomorrow, so I just thought I'd give you a little update of what's been happening over the last few days. So I think I last spoke to you on Sunday morning. So Sunday was a nice day. It was actually relatively quiet on call over last weekend. I think with everyone being on half term, a lot of families and people have left the island to go on holiday and seek some sun. So it was pretty relaxing. In the afternoon, I went over to Norwich Beach, which is this beautiful beach at the north of the island, and met up with one of the nurses that I work with called Al, a Welsh nurse who's lovely, and she belongs to a little wild swimming group with about 4 or 5 other women involved, plus a couple of the doctors that come here join it when they're up as well. So I'd managed to remember my wetsuit, but they very kindly lent me a hood and some mitts and some socks. And so we went into the sea. The air temperature was about 5 degrees and the sea temperature was about 10 degrees. So not something that I'm very acclimatised to, having come from Dorset, where the sea temperature's been up near 20 degrees. So they were in for about 45 minutes and enjoying jumping in the waves and getting fully immersed in the water. And I just went for a little breaststroke dip and got out after about 5 minutes. However, it was really nice and I felt really refreshed and de-stressed afterwards, and we had a nice warm coffee and some biscuits on the beach. And one of the women in the group, Jane, who got me involved, was incredibly friendly and invited us over to her home for dinner that evening, along with another woman from the group and her husband and Al, the nurse. So we had a lovely meal, sat round and talked about Unst and Shetland Islands, and we learned all sorts of interesting information about what they get up to and what's political at the moment on the island and what it's like to live here. So it was fantastic, and we were made to feel so welcome. And she's got a beautiful bungalow which overlooks Bolter Sound with a lovely view of the sea. So it was really nice. So that was a nice end to the weekend, and so I started the week actually not feeling particularly stressed. It was nice to go into work. By midweek this week we'd got the first winter or autumn gales of the year, and it got up to gale force 9, which meant they cancelled the main ferry coming up from Aberdeen, and we're talking about cancelling the inter-island ferries, but they didn't in the end. But it's quite difficult to get out and about when the wind is blowing at gale force 9. And I opened the car door and it was nearly blown off its hinges. So I mentioned this to the receptionist at work, and they said, that's a rookie error. You need to make sure you park your car so that it's pointing into the wind, because many a car door's been blown off on Shetland by the gales. However, it does make it quite tricky getting out of the car when you're trying to open the door into the wind. So fortunately there weren't too many home visits on that day. I didn't have to go out, and it was Wednesday, so we closed early. So I left work a little early and was able to go out with John to a craft place in the afternoon. So there's a place called Mella Soaps on the island, and it's a local woman who makes soaps with all natural materials, no palm oils, and makes them with essential oils. So we popped to her workshop and had a lovely chat with her and spent a small fortune on some of her really lovely products. And then, of course, we ended up at Victoria's Tea Rooms, which is just around the corner, for our weekly Wednesday cup of tea and a piece of cake. Anyway, it sounds like I've not been doing any work, but I have been going into work. I actually saw a case earlier in the week of suspected cauda equina, which is a medical emergency where you suspect that someone may have a problem with their spine that affects the nerves supplying their bladder, bowel and legs, and it needs identifying promptly. in case there's a cause that can be rectified. So this sort of case would normally be referred into hospital for an urgent MRI scan, but here on Shetland there is no MRI scanner, although they do have a CT scanner. So I referred the patient down to Lerwick Gilbert Bain Hospital, and they did do a CT scan. So far I don't know the result of, but they were obviously concerned enough about him and his symptoms to transfer him over to Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, which is where he is at the moment. So I've yet to find out what the outcome was of that. And then today I've had quite a busy day, fully booked. There's been a couple of fire guard incidents, so everybody here seems to have open fires. And yesterday I had an incident where a child was running around and spinning around and fell into a fire guard that was protecting a fire that was obviously lit. So he sustained a small burn to his arm. And then today there were 2 children lying on the floor, and the mum was making the fire, and she'd moved the cold fire guard out of the way. And then the brother came along and unfortunately knocked the quite heavy metal fire guard onto the heads of these 2 children. So they came in fairly promptly for an assessment, but thankfully they were fine. But sort of A&E type cases that wouldn't normally see as a GP in Dorset. So that's quite interesting. And then I had a lady this afternoon who I'd seen soon after I'd arrived, but she came back for a review. She's an older lady, and she was a bit short of breath when I saw her before, but she seemed significantly more short of breath this time. And it was quite difficult, really, because what I find easier is if it's very clear cut, somebody needs admission via ambulance, 999, you just call, you just organise that either with the helicopter or the ambulance. And if they're well enough, you try and treat them at home and manage them with what treatments you've got and what investigations you've got to hand. But it's the cases that are in the middle that aren't so serious, that are life-threatening emergencies, come to the end of the line of what you can safely organise and do within primary care. So I did admit her to hospital this afternoon for further tests. She really needed a couple of urgent blood tests, which you don't have access to on Unst because it takes nearly 2 days for a blood test to come back. And actually, if we'd have taken an urgent blood test now, it wouldn't go down to the Gilbert Bain Hospital until Friday morning on the public bus, and then the result probably wouldn't come back to me till Monday, which is no good. So you feel like you're perhaps referring more patients to hospital than you would normally, but then you haven't got the resources available to you to be able to perhaps manage risk in the same way. Anyway, I did what I thought was best at the time, and I hope the lady is okay. So that was the end of my day, really, and I just come home and it's now pouring down with rain, but thankfully the wind has dropped, and hopefully the weekend's going to be a bit nicer. So I've got one more full working day within the surgery, and then I've got the weekend on call, and then Monday will be when I do a handover to the doctor who will be coming over on the overnight boat on Sunday night, and will make her way up to the surgery on Monday morning for a handover. I've already started compiling a list of all the patients of concern so that it'll be easy to do the handover on Monday morning. And the other thing today is I met the other practice manager, so they job share here. One of them is from Shetland and the other one's from Canada, and she's just come back from Canada, so it was really nice to meet her, and she seems very switched on and clued up. So nice to meet another member of the team. I think I will feel sorry to leave the team. They've all been so friendly and lovely and welcoming, which must be quite hard for them, having a different doctor every 2 to 3 weeks to be like that. So I've been very grateful for how they've been with me. Anyway, I'm going to go inside because it's pouring with rain. There's no sheep or bird noise, but you can probably hear the rain pouring down.
That was quite another dramatic one. You have been busy. You've had some interesting cases or patients come to you. The interesting thing is that I was picking up on some frustration. You were talking about straightforward sort of 999 kind of cases, and then this middle ground.
Yeah.
And that seemed to concern you a little bit, or it was frustrating. Do you want to expand on that?
wouldn't say it was necessarily frustrating. It was just different to what I'm used to dealing with in general practice. So it's that managing risk that GPs are very good at generally, but you manage that risk knowing what resources are available to you. And obviously the resources there were fewer than what I would have in Dorset. So I think you probably are more cautious in that environment. You know, you might anticipate people becoming more unwell, so you would transfer them earlier than if you would, say, in Dorset, where you perhaps sit on things for a bit longer, and particularly children. It's just a different way of working, and I think that would just take a bit of getting used to.
It was quite interesting as well. You did make the comparison to some of the things you'd seen up there that you would never see down south here in England. And you mentioned 2 incidents with a fire guard.
Yeah, so there was obviously minor injuries that we were dealing with, and the nurses were actually very good at helping me with those, because, you know, they're not things that I've, you know, necessarily dealt with since my time in A&E in the 90s. So it was quite helpful having them there.
Yeah, and those kids luckily were okay, and it was nothing too major. Yeah. They would recover from that. Yeah. Now, when you were talking about the patient that had a much more serious condition, you were talking about the possibility you needed blood tests done, or that would have been useful. Yeah. So the blood, if you need a blood test, it actually goes on the local bus.
The public bus.
The public bus. Yeah. So, and then is offloaded on the bus goes onto a ferry, I guess. Yeah. So basically the bloods are taken, and then they're spun in a centrifuge in the surgery so that they last longer, basically, and then they get put in a sealed bag and put on the public bus, and the bus driver drives all the way down to Lerwick on 2 ferry rides away, and then delivers them to the hospital. So that's how it works there. So you met the second practice manager, and you've not met her at all, so you'd only dealt with the one. So have you ticked most of the boxes of people who work there permanently now? Yeah, I met I met all of the staff that worked there, so that was great. The other thing is that in this diary extract we had the wind and the rain actually, but the wind you were talking about, someone had warned you about your car door, and that I don't think they were joking, were they? That it can be so windy, car doors actually get blown off their hinges. Absolutely. And you can quite easily see how that happens. You can. As someone sitting here, it's like, really? Wind? Wow. Did you measure the wind when you were up there? No, Did you have any idea of how strong the wind was? I mean, we had gales in the first week or so, and then in that last week there was a good storm that came through. So there was some big ships that were obviously out in the North Sea came into shelter in a couple of the sounds. Yeah, it's pretty epic. So you did get most weather, didn't you? Except snow. Yeah. Okay, well, let's listen to your next diary extract. And actually, at the end of that one, you were already thinking about the handover. So it will be interesting to hear what goes on next. I just thought I'd send you a short recording because it's my last morning. So I've just got in the electric car and I'm just heading back down into work. It's a 5-minute drive. It's a showery day. It started off clear and beautiful, and now it's just poured with rain, with a huge rainbow out the back of where we're living, which is lovely. Just mixed emotions this morning, really. About 3 weeks ago I couldn't actually visualise this point. I didn't think that I'd be able to survive and cope and be good enough to deal with the work, and here I am. It's been an amazing 3 weeks. It's just been so brilliant to get out of my sort of daily life comfort zone at work and just do something different, and just it's been a real boost to my confidence at work. I think being menopausal, you kind of start thinking, I'm never going to be able to learn anything new, my brain doesn't work anymore, I'm too old. And actually it's shown me that you can. It's definitely not as easy as when I was in my 20s and 30s, but it's still possible, and I've got all that experience behind me now which I didn't have before. So I've seen a few things. I'm so glad I did the preparation I did going into A&E, and
relearning some old skills like the suturing side of things. Obviously I haven't finished yet. I've still got a weekend on call to do. Planning a swim on Sunday if the weather is okay, although the real field temperature is about 0 degrees, so we'll see how that goes. And yeah, sort of fire. I'm off to work now and see what the day has in store. The days are very unpredictable here. Some days are quiet, some days, like yesterday, were really quite busy and full on all day. So it's quite nice to turn up and not really know what the day's gonna hold. I'm just sat on the Northlink ferry. It's Monday evening, 16th of October, and our time in Shetland is over. My time at my GP sabbatical is coming to an end. So today, this morning at 9 o'clock, I handed over to the incoming GP called Karen. I'd written a handover document with patients of any concern or any outstanding actions, and we went through that, and I signed over all the controlled drugs and the car, charged the car up, or plugged it in to charge it up, and then said goodbye to the staff, which was actually a little bit sad. They were really lovely. One of the receptionists gave me a box of eggs from her chickens, which was so sweet because every Friday they seem to have a little treat where someone does a run to the local garage, which has got a little cafe, and they do fried egg and bacon and sausage rolls, and every week I'd get a fried egg roll was my order, and she said because I loved eggs so much she got me the box, which I thought was really sweet of her. Tinged with sadness, but actually quite pleased to be going home. It's quite limiting what you can do when you've got an on-call phone with you. You can't go out for long walks, long runs, long bike rides, and there's this constant low-level background stress that you've got that the phone might go off at any time, although actually it was relatively quiet. It didn't go off that much after the initial first day and first weekend on call. It was good actually chatting to Karen though about her experiences. She's been doing this work for 2 years now, and she comes from a similar background in that she was a partner in actually a city practice. And we were talking about the antiquated IT systems on Shetland and how it really slows you down, but actually it's not such an issue because the work is much less intense. The volume of work is much less, so it doesn't matter quite so much, but it is definitely a safety issue. And we just spoke about sort of what her experiences of the emergency on calls, and she says in 2 years she's actually had to get out of her bed about 4 times, so clearly it's not onerous at all. So that was quite interesting, and she clearly loves coming here. And this time she flew up to Sunborough Airport on the south of Shetland, and then got a taxi all the way up. Heading back down after I handed over, we got the ferry. Well, we got 2 ferries, so one that goes from Unst to Yell, then you drive all the way through Yell, and then you get the next ferry at the bottom of Yell across Yell Sound onto the Shetland mainland. The Yell ferry, normally there's 2 ferries that shuttle backwards and forwards. One of them had been damaged in the storms earlier in the week, so there was only 1 ferry, so we were a bit concerned that we would struggle to get onto it, but there was no problem at all. And although there was a bit of a wait for it, it took us 2.5 hours to get from the practice down to Lerwick, which a lot of the people on Unst do fairly regularly. They go to Tesco and they go to town, as it's known.
This is a crew announcement. Could the ship's electrician please contact reception? That's the ship's electrician, contact reception. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So yeah, we just had a nice lunch in Lerwick, and it's very nice to just sit down and relax and have a nice cup of tea. And now we've just boarded the ferry. We've got our cabin, which is really quite comfortable. Hopefully the sea state will be a bit better. A couple of days ago there was storm force winds, so I think it was pretty rough yesterday, but hopefully it should have calmed down a bit by today. And and then we head back to Aberdeen. Boat leaves at 5:30 in the afternoon, gets in at 7 in the morning in Aberdeen, and our plans are just to drive straight home. It's a 10-hour drive. It'd be nice just to get home and have a few days at home and just have a bit of time to reflect on our trip and on my work, and be interesting to see how I feel about it when I get back. But I've really enjoyed just doing the medicine, not having to be stressed about the running of a practice and all that goes with that, and just to focus on the patients and doing my best for them and making sure I'm working with the team. So yeah, it's been great, and it's definitely renewed my love of medicine. And I say it now, I would really love to come back. I'm not sure how that will fit into my future and how that will fit into my current practice. And actually, I think I probably just need to not do anything for the time being, get back into my partnership role and just see how I feel about things. Obviously, there's pros and cons to this job, this type of work, and I think coming up here on my own would be quite lonely and isolating. But a couple of the GPs, Karen, who I met today, they have thrown themselves into the life up here and have made social networks and seem to quite enjoy their time. So who knows what the future holds. Anyway, this is really my last little recording from Shetland.
For you, listening back, that must be quite poignant. What are you thinking of? What are you feeling?
It's interesting because actually a lot of my sort of memories around that time were of kind of worry and stress and anxiety about being able to do the job. And actually it's really nice to hear how I've sort of grown in confidence over the time that I was there, and that at the end of it I felt like, yeah, I could actually do this job. And it was nice to hear that back again, because I've kind of forgotten that feeling.
In one of your diaries, probably a couple back, I did ask you the question about would you go back, and you seemed uncertain. Now, during that diary, you actually said the opposite to me.
Yeah, it was just nice hearing back how I felt at the end of the 3 weeks, and actually reflecting back on those feelings. I think maybe I could do this again.
You've grown in confidence, and as a GP, I know you were doing other things because you were doing the emergency side of things there too. How did your time on Unst benefit you when you got back?
I mean, medically, I would say I felt more confident in dealing with sort of acute emergencies. Not that I was particularly underconfident before, but, I just felt I had that background confidence there, especially having done the basics course and so on. And then also, I just think in general, I just less burnt out and just renewed my kind of love of the actual clinical job.
Would you recommend it to other GPs?
Oh, definitely. In fact, I've already recommended it to our registrar. I think he's doing his basics course next week or coming up, and he's looking at working up there when he qualifies.
Because there's that constant turnover of GPs up there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, that's a good news thing, isn't it? So you're encouraging GPs to try something else, and knowing that you have and they will get a lot out of it.
Indeed, yeah.
The other thing you did say, and I'm going to have to take this up with you, is that you kind of dreaded going back, but really because you're overworked. You've got this 13-hour day often. It's a bit sad to hear that you were not exactly jumping up, and you were happy to be going back to see your friends, your family, and to have the freedom of not being on call all the time. But I was quite sad as, someone who doesn't work in medicine hearing that.
I mean, and I can't say, unfortunately, it's got any better since I came back. In fact, it's probably got worse. So, yeah, the days are intense. They're 12, 13-hour days with very minimal breaks. So it's not particularly enjoyable or something that's sustainable, really.
So I can actually see why you might want to go back and experience that very pressurised but very different. I mean, it's a different world, and not just the medicine, just being on the island.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's a very particular type of life, and it's not something that I'd want to do all the time. It might be something that you dip in and out of.
You did, on a few occasions, mention your husband, John. What did he get out of the experience, do you think? What were his feelings coming back on that ferry?
I think he was quite happy to be coming home, particularly as he wasn't working, so he had fairly minimal contact with other people, although we did go out for dinner that one evening. And he's a very sociable person, so I think it probably wouldn't suit him to keep going back there. And he did say that he probably wouldn't go back with me if I did go back and work. But having said that, he loved the wildlife and he loved the outdoors and the wildness of it, and is glad that he had the opportunity to go.
So if there's anything that you can leave the listener with after listening back to your diaries, any feelings or thoughts that perhaps you think we should cover before we say goodbye?
Just that, in your 50s, don't think it's all downhill to retirement. There are new opportunities and new things you can learn and do in your life, and just grab those opportunities.
Yeah, well, you did mention the menopause again.
Yes.
But,
Sorry about that.
Men have them too, I think. But yes, you did a great thing, and hopefully you've inspired sort of not just doctors, but other people to maybe, as you say, do something different, get out of the comfort zone and perhaps go somewhere new too.
New, yeah, and feel like you're doing some good, but perhaps in a new environment.
This podcast is copyrighted by Michelle Langthorne and all rights are reserved.